Could Sparta, at its absolute peak, actually defeat the Roman Empire? Most people think they know the answer, and they're probably wrong. Because this isn't just a fight between two powerful armies, it's a clash between two completely different ideas of what war even is. On one side, Sparta, a city that turned its entire population into a military system. At its height, Sparta could field only around 8,000 to 10,000 full Spartan citizens, elite, heavily trained, and built for one purpose. On the other side, Rome, an empire that, at its peak, could mobilize hundreds of thousands of soldiers across multiple legions. So the real question isn't who wins the first battle, it's what happens after that battle is over. When one side is small, elite, and perfected, and the other is massive, adaptable, and built to keep coming back. And that's where this gets dangerous. At its peak, Sparta didn't just have good soldiers, it had some of the most disciplined infantry in the ancient world. Training started young, around age 7, in a system designed to produce obedience, endurance, and absolute cohesion. By adulthood, a Spartan soldier wasn't just skilled, he was conditioned. Armed with a long spear, heavy shield, and bronze armor, he fought in a tight formation, the phalanx, where each man's shield protected the next. Individually strong, collectively extremely hard to break. And in a direct head-on engagement, that formation could dominate. For a long time, that worked, until it didn't. Because Sparta wasn't built to adapt, it was built to execute. And that sounds like a small difference, but it changes everything. Now look at Rome. Rome didn't start as the strongest. It didn't start as the most disciplined, and it definitely didn't start as the most feared. What it did have was a system. Rome treated war less like a single event, and more like an ongoing process. Lose a battle? Fine. Adjust. Lose again? Good. Now they've learned something. Lose again after that? Now Rome is getting dangerous. Because now it isn't just reacting anymore, it's learning. Because Rome didn't need to be perfect, it just needed to still be there. And that changes everything. At this point, it feels like Sparta should win. Better soldiers, stronger discipline, unbreakable formations. In a clean, controlled battle, that's Sparta's world. But there's a problem. Sparta doesn't get to choose the kind of war it fights, because Rome doesn't play by those rules. And this is where most people get the question wrong. Roman armies were built differently, more flexible, more adaptable. Less about holding one perfect formation, and more about adjusting as the situation changed. If something didn't work, they didn't double down. They shifted. If the center stalled, they applied pressure somewhere else. If the enemy held strong, they stretched, surrounded, and outlasted. And if everything went wrong, they didn't collapse. They reset and came back again. And then there's the numbers. A single Roman legion might field around 4,000 to 5,000 men, but Rome rarely fought with just one. Multiple legions, plus allied forces, meant Roman armies could outnumber a Spartan force several times over. Sparta's strength was quality. Rome's strength was scale. Now imagine the first battle. This is where most people think the answer is obvious. Flat ground, clean engagement. Sparta holds formation. The phalanx advances, disciplined, unified, relentless. And in that moment, Rome struggles. Because breaking that kind of wall head-on is incredibly difficult. Sparta could absolutely win that fight. And that's exactly where the real problem begins. But Rome doesn't lose once and walk away. That's the difference. Rome studies what just happened, adjusts tactics, changes positioning, brings in more troops, pressures supply lines, forces movement. Because Rome understood something critical. Winning a battle and winning a war are not the same thing. And this is where things start to tilt. Sparta couldn't replace losses quickly. Every Spartan soldier represented years, decades of training. Lose a few hundred? That matters. Lose 1,000? That's devastating. You couldn't just replace a Spartan, you had to raise one, and that takes years. Rome didn't have that problem in the same way. It wasn't infinite, but it was deep. Manpower, allies, resources, all feeding into a system that could keep going long after most armies would stop. So even if Sparta wins the first battle, and it absolutely could, Rome doesn't disappear. It doesn't collapse. It doesn't panic. It just says, all right, again, and again, and again. This is where most armies break. Rome doesn't. This is the part most people underestimate. Wars aren't decided in a single dramatic moment. They're decided in the part nobody wants to watch. The regrouping, the rebuilding, the willingness to keep fighting when the outcome isn't clear. And that's exactly where Rome becomes incredibly difficult to beat. Imagine this playing out. Sparta wins an early engagement. The formation holds. The discipline works. Rome takes losses. It looks like the prediction was right. But then, Rome adjusts, changes tactics, brings in more forces, pressures different angles. And suddenly, the next battle isn't the same. And the one after that, even less so. Sparta is still strong, still disciplined, still incredibly dangerous. But now, it's being pulled into a kind of war it wasn't designed for. A longer war, a messier war. A war where perfection matters less than endurance. And that's the turning point. Because Sparta was built to win the fight in front of it. Rome was built to win the war around it. So could Sparta defeat the Roman Empire? In a single battle? Honestly, yes. If everything lines up right, Sparta could absolutely win. In a short war? It's possible, but unlikely. Because Sparta has to win fast. It has to break Rome before Rome adapts. And that window is small. But here's the one scenario where this flips completely. There is a scenario where Sparta could actually pull this off. Not by outlasting Rome, not by matching its numbers, but by breaking it early. Imagine this. Rome sends a force, maybe 1 or 2 legions, into Greek territory. Confident, organized, experienced, but not expecting Sparta at its absolute peak. They meet on terrain that favors the phalanx, tight ground, limited maneuvering, no easy flanking routes. Now the Roman advantages, flexibility, movement, start to shrink. And that's a problem, because Rome needs space to work. And the Spartan advantage gets amplified. The phalanx holds, advances, pushes, disciplined, unified, relentless. The Roman lines struggle to break it. Their formations compress. Their movement disappears. And suddenly, Rome is stuck fighting Sparta's kind of battle. If that force doesn't just retreat, but collapses, that's not just a loss. It's a shock. A signal that this enemy is different. A political problem. A military problem. If Sparta follows that victory fast, presses aggressively, forces another engagement before Rome fully adapts, targets isolated forces instead of full armies, there's a narrow window where momentum matters more than scale, where Rome hasn't adjusted yet, where the system hasn't caught up. And in that window, Sparta could win. Not by destroying the entire Roman Empire, but by defeating a Roman campaign so decisively that it forces Rome to pull back, regroup, or rethink expansion in that region. A short war, a controlled war, a war on Sparta's terms. But that window is small, and it closes fast, because the longer the war goes, the more it shifts away from perfection, and toward endurance. And this is where the outcome stops being close. Because Sparta was built for perfection, Rome was built for survival. And history has a pattern. It doesn't always reward the strongest, or the most disciplined, or even the most feared. It rewards the side that's still standing, when everyone else has run out of ways to keep fighting.